Welcome back to the Smiling Homeschooler podcast. I'm Ben Wilson, and we're glad you're here. This week, we're talking all about math, which really matters, and how we actually use it in everyday life, and how you can help your kids and maybe yourself smile a little bit more while doing it. We want to thank Teaching Textbooks for making the Smiling Homeschooler possible. Their math curriculum is the one that we prefer, and we think it's one of the best out there. So if you haven't checked them out, you can do so over at teachingtextbooks.com. Also, today's show is being underwritten by Samaritan Ministries, a community of Christians who pay one another's medical bills, helping families take a safe step of faith as they feel God's leading in career or ministry changes or in bringing moms home. And you can learn more over at samaritanministries.org/familyman. /familyman. There you go. So let's get going. Here's my dad, Todd Wilson.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're having a great day. It was a beautiful day here in Indiana, northern Indiana, beautiful fall day. But, even on a beautiful fall day, there's a little bit of me that says, who cares? Because it's like fall. There's no summer. It's like you have a good day. And it's like get your hopes up like it's going to get warmer. It's just going to get worse. In fact, I think it's supposed to snow like next Monday or something like that. The weatherman can be off, so we're hoping that that's true. But it was a beautiful day today. This is a great time, to do all your fall things. Halloween's passed, and now we can kind of enjoy getting ready for Thanksgiving. And I was even thinking, I really should get out like the Thanksgiving jar, because we've done that for years, but I kind of get a little slack on it, where you just kind of bring it out the last minute. And for years, we put out a little jar with some slips of paper next to it and a pencil that just, the idea was you would write things you were thankful for. And then since we're not around Thanksgiving Day, usually that weekend, we read them out loud and then we thank God collectively. But I think maybe the more important thing is just taking the time to write them down and to be thankful for them. And, we're thankful for you that we get to do this. It's a super important thing. And people tell us all the time, it feels like in the sea of homeschooling discouragement, we're kind of a voice of reminding you that you're not alone and that you've got this thing called homeschooling and that it's worth it. So today we're going to talk about that four-letter word, bum, bum, bum.
It's a big
math.
one. Yep.
Math. And I'm just going to say a disclaimer right off the bat. I'm not a math guy. I'm not a numbers guy. Ben was always kind of a numbers guy. I don't know if all math came easy for you, Ben, but I know that you kind of get it. It makes sense to you.
I mean, certain types of things. I thought something we could have done for the past subjects, but I thought would be kind of fun to do now, is kind of how we actually use the subject day to day, like now that we're, adults. But for math, I mean, I don't get all math, but I do feel like, I do think through numbers a lot of ways, like I really do like statistics, and I like thinking of like, oh, this is whatever percentage of this thing and all that kind of stuff. So I think use it more than some people probably do, just when I'm thinking about stuff. But I am not like advanced math all the time or anything like that. And I hated geometry. I really, really struggled with geometry just because it was just so abstract and I just felt like it wasn't concrete, but which I know it is, but it was just more vague to me. So, but I mean, I guess kind of on that topic, Dad, what do you think, like how, if you had to use math nowadays, what do you feel like you most frequently use math?
Okay, you have to kind of, since not you can't all see this, and this is why you should watch it on Facebook every while. Here's basically how I do math. What's 2 plus 2?
He's stomping his leg like
a horse.
Yes.
Like Ernest T. Bass. I avoid math at all costs. I do use it. I probably use not fractions, but I use the tape measure. I use rulers all the time. And so I know 1/8 inches and, 3/4 inches, when you have 2 of those, it's 1.5, and so I probably do that. I do simple math, multiplication, division. But if it gets to any more complicated, Debbie will say, oh, yeah, sometimes you have to solve for X. I'm like, I don't get it. I can't solve for X. I don't know how to do that. Even though, again, and I've said this before, I've had all the math you can that a person could take. I had calculus in high school. I had an advanced calculus course in college, and I passed it, which is a total miracle. And I'm thinking, there's no way. I mean, I don't even know what was going on. I was just like, I think I was a good guesser or something. It
Once
was
you get
not.
to certain levels, though, it's really tough to guess. I tried for one, and I was
Oh,
starting to get
yeah.
really lost. I was like, okay, I got to go back and relearn what I'm doing here. Cause
I never learned it. I just didn't understand it.
Mm,
Didn't make any sense to me. But I do think math is important. It is important, and that's kind of. I know, Ben, you use it because you're kind of like, and that's what I said at the beginning. You're kind of a math guy because you're always thinking percentages. That we did X amount of percentage better this month than we did last month, or if we did 45 times more of these. I never think those things. I mean, when people start talking about, viewership, even on the podcast, or how many I just check out. I don't even care. It's just not I don't get any fun in recreational math. I don't like playing
mm-hmm.
games where I have to keep track of scores. I just don't like that.
Yeah. I mean, I do use it a lot, not necessarily, I mean, just for this kind of thing, but at work a lot. I mean, I have to track stuff. I have to, figure out issues that a lot of times evolve around numbers. I have to, we do like a lot of benchmarks and stuff like that just to see like where we're at with certain, things that we track. So I do a decent amount there, but the thing nowadays is like, as long as you can think about the problem and understand like what you're trying to solve, you really don't have to know how to work it all out as much. So the amount of times I'm like actually doing like anything more than just basic arithmetic or maybe some division or multiplication, is very, very rare. Most of the time, if it's like something more advanced, I can just, use an online tool or something like that to figure it out if I need to. I do think one thing I do appreciate, and this I don't think is everyone, I think this is just how I think. I do feel like I can mentally do some quick math pretty fast, and I do appreciate that, even though it's not tough stuff. We're just talking like basic arithmetic, but the amount of times it's helpful when I'm talking to my boss or something, and he'll be like, well, we did this and this. And I'm like, so real quick, I'll be like, oh, so that's like what, 10, 15% better, 12% better than last year roughly. And being able to do that quickly does really help a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just kind of, again, maybe that's how, my mind works more.
So what would you say, Ben, that I mean, really, as we're homeschoolers and we're doing math, because there's so many programs out there, that tell you what you need to do. And if you listen to those threads of conversation very long, it pretty much says, you have to, maybe you don't have to do calculus, but you should be doing advanced algebra and all those things. What do you think the average what do you think the average person uses in math? I mean, really, realistically,
average person,
in the business world, even in the business world.
I mean, average person, I would say less than algebra, probably on average. I mean, it really does depend on what you're doing. If you're obviously in like accounting, you probably will be, maybe needing some of that more advanced stuff. But even that, a lot of it is just knowing how to create formulas within like Excel or something like that so that it can calculate it for you. But it would be helpful if you understand like how to do it. You could do like, okay, I want to do, this column plus this column, solve for whatever, and you can do all that in there. So I would think if you're going to be like wanting to be like some kind of accountant, CPA, even just bookkeeper, like some of that probably would be a little bit used, but not much. Otherwise, I mean,
unless you're an engineer,
obviously, if you're doing anything advanced, you got to know a lot more. But
I remember a friend, Bill Wheeler, who was an engineer, and he said, we have a guy in our office who does the math. So if we have something that we need to done, we go to him. Because there are math people, even though I'm not one of them. There are math people, and
he's probably talking like super advanced stuff. I mean, well, same with like programming. You really do have to, if you're doing like advanced stuff, you really have to understand like how things are thinking through, calculating. Like I know my cousin Steven, he's works for Salesforce, and he has to use a lot of advanced math. That being said, go ahead though. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead and finish what you're going to say.
I was just going to say, that being said, like we really do have to come to terms with like AI is really, really going to be disrupting a lot of these things when it comes to advanced math and stuff like that. So not saying you shouldn't know how to do it, because you do, I think, need to know how to do it. And I don't think it's good to rely on that for everything. But I mean, even advanced stuff, it is crazy now. So it is just going to have to be interesting to see how that's going to just affect really everything. I mean, which Google could do a lot of that before, and you could use, programs to do a lot of that. So it already was changing the landscape of what you needed to know, because back in the day, like when you were a kid, if you didn't know how to solve for, algebra, there was just no other option. Like you couldn't solve it, like someone had to solve it by hand.
Well, you could. We called it cheating.
Yeah. But I mean, someone had to do it. There wasn't any computer or any,
Right.
I mean, until later. But now, I mean, that is the most simple thing you could ever do. I mean, you just either Google it, you could use Wolfram Alpha, you could use your calculator, whatever it is, So it's like, there's just a lot more options nowadays. So some of that advanced stuff, I mean, if you're only going to use it once out of a 10-year period, there's been one time where I had to do algebra we were trying to solve like what number we needed to hit something else, and we were trying to, so we actually created like a formula for it and stuff. But it's like, I mean, now it's just like we just ask AI to do it and we do it instantaneously. We never even need to learn it. So it's just.
Now, I will tell you that any of you non-math people who are listening to this show right now have probably already turned it off because, what Ben is talking about, you're like, I don't care, and that's a non-math person. We just don't think that way. But I do think that math is important. I mean, our kids need to know math. And I can remember, and maybe I've shared this in the past, but I can remember one time talking to a big group of people at the Florida Homeschool Convention, actually. And I was talking about math. And I said, how many people need, that basic math, addition, subtraction? How many people use it every day? Everybody put their hand up in the whole room. There was probably 500 people in there. I said, how many people multiply and divide? Everybody put their hands up in the air. I said, how many people use fractions every single day? And really, it was not very many. I would say 20% maybe, and that was, some of them were being generous. They're like, oh, I have to, if I use a third of a cup and I double it, I need 2/3 of a cup now, and then I said, how many of you solve for X? And it was a very small number. I finally I said, how many use theorems every single day? There was one guy in the back who raised his hand. And this was all just, I was thinking off the cuff. I said, so by those numbers, it would seem to me like the smart thing would be to teach all of our kids how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Not all our kids are going to need are going to need to know how to solve for X. Not everybody, and there's only going to be 1% or 1% out of 500, whatever that percentage that is, who really will ever use theorems. Doesn't mean we shouldn't use it, but it just means if you have a limited time, you can't teach everything to everybody, so how are you going to do it? And I do think, Ben, and I would ask you, there are math kids who are going to use math. I would guess that Jed will use math some in his future. He likes numbers. He's fast at them. He can do them in his head. He understands algebra. He understands that stuff. And so what would you think, Ben, a math kid looks like? And I haven't given you any time to think about it.
Yeah.
But what do you think a math kid looks like? Because, I always say I'm not a math kid. Most of your kids are not math kids. What does a math kid look like?
I mean, I don't know if like advanced math, like the early signs of that, but I think there is just like not a fear of numbers. They probably stick in their head a little bit better. If you give a number to someone and they just completely just doesn't even register, I think that's a signifier. That's just not how they think, Also, I think, it's an intuitive thing. I mean, Rinley, I feel like Hudson, just really latches on really quickly. Like he understands how
agree.
The numbers just work, he'll be like, oh, that's this and this is this, he gets it, and there's just like some of those signs of like, oh, if they're picking it up really quickly, it may not mean they're going to be, you have a career in it, but it just means they probably are, tending that direction by default. It's kind of like, as we always talk about, Kathy Cook and the 8 smarts. Like, it's just, it's just like some of those things where you can tell they think that way because they just start thinking that way. I mean, it's just, it's kind of
I think that is so interesting because even as you said about Hudson is 6, and Hudson, I was talking about him tonight. Hudson is like, when we make calendars or something, he comes out to help me, and he'll say, "Pops, where do you want me to stack these things?" And I'm like, "You stack them right there." And he goes, "Right here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, right there." And I'm like, we go on for like 10 minutes of how to stack the calendars. But when he talks about mathing numbers, he's pretty assertive in his numbering. He'll say, "Oh, we did this many," or "You have this many."
Really cares
and he
about
knows.
track
and I
of
think
the scores
that is the sign of a math. I mean, even I heard someone say, when I say the word to you, Ben, dog, what do you see?
I see the word.
That's so interesting to me because I don't see the word. I see a dog. I see a picture of a dog. Ben's mom, Debbie, she sees D-O-G. She spells out the word. I have a friend, Greg, who says, "I see a graph." And I'm like, "You see a graph?" Now, this guy's a numbers guy. He's a language guy. He likes knowing how things go up and down, and and money but I just think that's what a math guy sees. Somehow a math guy sees those things as things to be solved, and they see the numbers. And I think some of our kids are going to be math kids. And so, there are so many things out there that our kids need to know. I think the beauty of homeschooling is that we can't teach our kids everything. What we should do is be fanning the flames of the things that they are good at. Not spending gobs and gobs of time. Because even like my son Cal, he was doing algebra and he was getting frustrated, and he was doing it. And he was kind of, and that's what we're going to talk about teaching textbooks in just a second. One of the beauties of teaching textbooks is that it explains every single problem.
Right. And that is huge.
That is huge, especially if you're not a math person trying to teach your non-math kids, math. Because I don't understand it. And Debbie was saying, because he was getting frustrated by the whole thing, he was lagging behind. And I said, "Honey, I think it's time to just stop." And this is when he's, 17 years old. And she goes, "Yeah, but he gets it." And I'm like, "He doesn't get it, because I didn't get it. I could do it, but I didn't get it. I didn't understand what they were trying to get me to do." Jed kind of understands that. He gets it. One's a math kid, one's not a math kid. And so I think, this is Todd speaking, not God. I think what we do, since all our kids need those basics, we work on the basics. I think, learning your math facts is important because you want to be able to come up fairly quickly. And I think we were talking about that with Ben. Ben wasn't sure he could do all of his really quickly right now. And I'm not going to quiz him on his eights right now. But, those are things that come in handy, but I wouldn't cry over them. If your kids were stumped on them, I'd just plug away and not worry about it. And there would be a certain point where I would get with each of my children, no matter whether their bent is math or not. And I would say, "Okay, we are at a stopping point now. It's not going to be in multiplication and division because our kids all need to multiply and divide. That it may be in fractions that we say, hey, we're not going to go any farther because I can see your bent is not going this way. I've decided as a parent, I'm not letting my child decide. I can see your future doesn't lie in this area, and if it does somehow, and your kid says, later on, oh, I want to be a engineer, and you have to go back and fix some things that they might have to be, I'm okay with that too.
I personally would probably lean a little bit more like, I don't know if I would stop at fractions. That's pretty early on. I mean, that's like in the first couple of years. So I don't necessarily think I would go that early maybe, but I don't think you need to sweat it as it goes on. And I think the one thing is like, if you even if you don't remember it all, if you've learned some of it enough to understand roughly, then you can go look it up and get the answers later on if you need to. You know, it's like a lot of the stuff, like I don't use it, I don't remember how to do it. And, but if I needed to look it up, I could be like, oh yeah, that's how you do it. I remember now just because I did it 15 years ago, you know. One of my literal worst moments of my life that I hated more than anything else was at our homeschool co-op. Was they just like spur of the moment, they were like made groups or something, and they made some math problem on the board, and they were like, okay, you need to solve this for some reason. And it was like the lady there who's like super academic, whatever, and she just was, and I was supposed to solve for algebra, and I hadn't done it in like 3 or 4 years because I'd moved on to other stuff or whatever. And I was just like, I can't remember how to do it. This is my worst state. Literally, I hate looking stupid in front of people. It was a nightmare. But other than that, it's never been a problem. But but I do think, because really fractions are just percentages. They are just, you know, I mean, you're gonna interact with that stuff regardless if you think you're not or not throughout life.
I can't do fractions. I can't do fractions.
But you do. You just said like, oh,
1 1/3 times
yeah,
2 and a half.
But you're still using the idea of like, you know, what
you
amount of something is roughly or whatever. But yeah.
Roughlies. I can do roughlies.
That's honestly a big thing. I think roughlies are really important, but I don't know how you really teach that. But I think getting close is actually
they call it estimation.
Yeah, estimation.
And they do cover that.
Really
they do
helpful.
cover that. But I like roughlies. I like that. Hey, this would be a good time to say we want to thank Samaritan Ministries and their latest all-digital offering called Redeem Health Share Ministry for being part of today's show. Redeem upholds the same great mission as Samaritan of Christians helping other Christians share their healthcare needs. But Redeem offers even more flexible programs like a group option for churches, businesses, and ministries. And also there's an exclusive add-on feature that makes services like dental, vision, preventative, and even alternative treatments eligible for sharing. So if you're looking at a job change, you know, or feel like you pay too much in health insurance, which my wife and I have had this conversation recently, or you're just tired of the healthcare program you're part of, can I encourage you to check out redeemhealthshare.org and be part of the team Redeem?
Yeah. We will talk about teaching textbooks here in just a second, but I did want to say also, I just blanked on it though. Oh, one other thing before we talk about why I do think teaching textbooks is really effective, and this is something we've talked about before on the podcast, but you know, our mom had us do towards the end of our school time as you know, being homeschooled, was work on kind of like a business math is what she called it, but you know, just really just practical math, like you know, budgeting, stuff like that. And I do think that I don't know if this would fall under math really, but just doing things like understanding roughly how taxes work, or understanding roughly how insurance works, or understanding how to do, you know, money related things. I think that is really helpful. I think,
and of course that's for older kids.
Yeah, right. Just practical math kind of deal. I think that's really helpful. Now, obviously, like balancing the whole checkbook, like that part, it's just not really done anymore. I don't know many people who actually do that, but understanding like I have X amount of money and working through that, obviously that's simple. It's just simple arithmetic, but I think it's still helpful to think through that.
Well, hey, let's talk about teaching textbooks because, you know, they've been a sponsor of the show from the very beginning once we started. And I know a lot of times when you hear about a sponsor, because I hear about sponsors, you know, on Dave Ramsey and things like that, and you think, yeah, they're just doing it because they're paying them. Really, this is a partnership that we sought out because, you know, there are a lot of math programs, there are a lot of other curriculum out there that I would not approach to be a part of our show. Not because I think they're bad, but they don't add the smiles. They do the opposite. In fact, we've been approached by other companies to sponsor the show, and I've said, you know, I just don't think that's a good fit. So I can remember when we began our journey of not homeschooling, but of being at homeschool conventions, maybe the first or second place we'd ever been, it was in Indianapolis. Maybe it was the first one. And there were the two guys who were brothers that were beside us in our booth, and their booth was right next to it, and we were talking. And they had just started this program called Teaching Textbooks. and they had one the offering where they were offering algebra, and I can remember that, because back then you're so hungry, you're like, hey, they're asking everybody, what are your kids doing for algebra? And I can remember they asked me, like, what have your kids been thinking about algebra? And I'm like, yeah, I think he's 8, or 9, and so no, and but over the years, we used teaching textbooks. We I wouldn't, in love is a strong word for a math program. But we loved it. And what I loved is that I can remember one time my daughter, Catherine, she was having a tea party with her friends, and they were all sitting around. And, these are girls who are like 11, 12, and they were talking about teaching textbooks and how much they loved it. And it was at that time that I thought, wow, boy, I don't hear many kids talking about their program and why they like it. And so it really caused me to look at teaching textbooks differently than other programs. And maybe, Ben, I know, again, I mentioned this, I think last week or the week before, that, Renly's been doing teaching textbooks and liking
Right.
it. You know,
Yep.
what do you think? What's so good about teaching textbooks in your mind?
To me, it boils down to, and when I use it, and it's gotten a lot better even since then. But I think one of the worst ways to learn something in math, at least for me, is to have someone try to explain it and then you just try to do it. And that is like such a hard way to learn for me. Like I have to be doing it while I'm doing it, or while it's being taught, or else I just won't understand it. So a lot of times it's like, to solve for whatever, you have to first subtract itself from itself, and then you have to, and it's just like, okay, now apply that, and here's a big list of problems, you got to do that. And that's just never worked for me. And we did a lot of other math curriculums, but teaching textbooks, it was like, okay, we're going to, let's say we're doing fractions, it would say, here's how you do it, here's the first part of the problem, and you would have to put in the answer that it just shown you how to do. And so it'd be like, okay, do this section, now do this part, now do this part, now do this part, and then here's how we got to the answer. And it would literally break it down. You have to put in every number throughout the entire lecture, and then as you're going, and it's really breaks it down to as simple as it possibly can get. And then at least for me, I was understanding it while it was happening. So if it's division, it doesn't just say put the number in, carry 10, whatever. It's like you do it, so then you're actually understanding it while they're teaching it. And so then by the time you get done with the lecture and you go to the practice problems, you can't, it's just what you just did. So it felt very natural, because it's like, well, this doesn't feel scary because I just did all the things I just, everything it's asking me to do. It just had me do it, a minute ago, and it walked you through every single one of them. And then it helps you if you get stuck, and it teaches you where you get wrong and all that kind of stuff. So it's just super effective, I thought, at actually helping me understand what I'm doing, not just glazing over and then struggling through it once I get to the problems. And Renly likes it because it's just fun. It's a lot more engaging. It's presented well, and it's interactive. So you're just, it's harder to turn your brain off and get zoned out or something like that, since you have to interact with it the whole time.
Well, and I think one of the great things about it too is that, Ben's mom is a math person, so she still gets it. She understands all
Right.
that. But teaching textbooks allowed her then she could come in and help if she needed to. But what I liked about it was that if it had been on my shoulders, I would have just skipped math. My kids wouldn't know how to, they'd have to add with their feet. But with teaching textbooks, I could say, hey, this will help you through it. And it's not, like Ben said, it's not just they throw out a problem and they give you a lecture, then they tell you to go ahead and do it. They talk you through, if you needed to, every single problem. Now they give you hints. If you get stuck, it will give you a hint to get you started again. And if you get in trouble, they'll help you even more. And now they've added so much. They have all the grade levels, and they just keep getting better and better. So that's why we have asked them if they want to be a part of the show, because we believe in teaching textbooks. And the thing that I like the best, Ben, isn't just their program. It's the two brothers who started this. Because you know what? there are some people who talk about, I see lots of different offerings of math. It seems like somebody's offering a new way to do math every single
Mm-hmm.
year. And they always sound so excited about their program. Like, this is going to change everything. Your kids are going to love math. Well, as I've talked to these two guys who started it, they understand that not everybody's going to love math. And they would say with me that not everybody needs to have that higher math, that you can decide what's needed and what's not needed. And I like their heart, even more than I like their program. And I like the program probably because of their heart.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hey, we're out of time. And again, the purpose of this time, as we've talked about each of these subjects, is to help you think through some of the places that you might be getting stuck. I know math is a biggie. Lots of people get stuck on math. I mean, whenever they talk about, I just don't understand, or I feel like I'm in over my head, math is the one. And, the thing is, you get to decide again what's best for your kids. If you have a math kid you think that's going to use a lot of math, teach them all the math they need to know. And by the way, you won't be able to hold them back. You'll just be able to put some of these things like teaching textbooks in their place. It can teach them all they need to know. I remember again one time I was at a homeschool event, and two of the state leaders from the state were there, and then we were talking beforehand, and they said, "Oh, we didn't teach our kids algebra. We just knew they weren't going to use it. We just stopped teaching it." And I was talking later to the group, and I pointed out these two people, and I said, "Oh, these people right here, they didn't do algebra." And they both looked at me and stuck their finger over their lips, like, "Shh, like don't tell anybody." And it really saddened me that we have come to this point that we can't say honestly, "I didn't do this part," because the truth is they were homeschoolers. They get to decide what's best for their kids. You get to decide the same thing too. So I hope if you're having math struggles, I hope you take advantage of our sponsor, Teaching Textbooks. Check them out, and I think you'll be happy with them. And again, you get to decide what's best for your kids. And from one math kid, non-math kid, to maybe another non-math person listening, whatever you do, make sure you're smiling.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We appreciate y'all being here. If you need more encouragement or you want to encourage another mom, you can go to our website, thesmilinghomeschooler.com. We have a bunch of books and calendars and spinners and lots of other materials that can be super encouraging for you, but also make great gifts for other moms. So if you want to encourage someone else, definitely go do that. Also, again, we appreciate Teaching Textbooks, and we appreciate Samaritan Ministries. Yes, Dad?
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt, except I wanted to say, which you reminded me, our You to Dad daily calendar is now available. The best gift for dads. Dads have already been ordering them already. I just put it up last week. You can get yours at our website, thesmilinghomeschooler.com, and go to our store, and you'll find it right there in the Christmas section.
Yep.
Or the featured section. The You to Dad daily calendar. Best tool, best gift ever for dads.
You should do it. Again, thank you to Samaritan Ministries, a community of Christians that pay one another's medical bills, helping families take a safe step of faith as they feel God's leading in career or ministry changes or in bringing mom home. And you can learn more over at samaritanministries.org/familyman. And we appreciate their supporting of the Smiling Homeschooler as well. But have a great week, and don't forget to smile. See you next week.